Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this new free video on the shadow. I'm going to be talking about that subtle and sometimes strong shadow that we may see when we're scanning the thyroid, and how this shadow, sometimes we can recognize it as such, but sometimes it can mimic abnormalities. And so the idea is to be aware of it and how can we get rid of it. So, as you know, on the image here, you can see that the sternocleidomastoid muscle is visible whenever we scan the thyroid. In this particular example, you can see how that orange line is delineating the end of the more medial end of this muscle. And most times, even though the end of it falls on the thyroid lobe that we see posteriorly, it doesn't cause any artifact or shadow refraction that may affect the visibility of the lobe. And so nowadays also with things like compound imaging, usually these shadows from the refraction do not affect the image as much as it used to be in the past. However, depending on the machine you're using, depending on whether you have compound imaging on, I mean, most times by now, nowadays, it's on by default. But, if you accidentally turn it off or your preset doesn't have it on automatically, it's a good idea to be aware of it and how to get rid of it. So let me advance to the next image. So this is what I'm talking about. Here you can see again on the top, you can see how the edge of the sternocleidomastoid shown by the orange line, and then you have the shadow, very subtle shadow indicated by the two yellow arrows. So obviously in this case, it doesn't cause a big deal. It's not a big problem, right? But for example, if I was to show you this example here, you can see how that shadow is a little stronger in this case, right? Yes, the shadow does not have the shape of a lesion. So, we're not going to jump into the conclusion that there is a nodule. However, perhaps to a novice sonographer, this may be a little bit of a confusing finding, right? As we all know, we have to, if we find something, we want to make sure that we look at it in both planes. And so when we turn, we shouldn't be able to see this. However, sometimes I have seen this also in the sagittal plane. Here you can see again the edge of the muscle on the top superficially, and that strong shadow. Again, it doesn't have a round shape as a nodule. However, it will puzzle someone in terms of what is this, right? And here's an example where the shadow actually does look like a nodule. You can see how it has sort of like an ovalish shape. And so in this particular case, that could be very much confusing. We don't want to create things that are not there. And again, for someone who's new at this, they may jump into the conclusion that there is something wrong. Of course, like I said before, we want to change our angle 90 degrees to, in this case, sagittal, and see if we can also reproduce it. But we can also do other things, as I'm going to talk about in just a second. So anyway, this is an example of when this shadow mimics a nodule. Here you can also see that the shadow is affecting almost half of the thyroid lobe here. Here you can see there's two muscles being delineated. But the point here is that junction between these two muscles is falling on almost half of this right lobe of the thyroid. And so again, it makes it look abnormal. Again, perhaps not that it's a nodule, but it's an abnormal area. And then here in this particular case, we can see how that shadow almost darkens the entire thyroid lobe. So obviously this is going to affect the visibility. So I'm sure that you have seen this type of refraction, this type of shadow when you scan. And so what can we do in order to get rid of it? So first of all, be aware of it, right? And then second of all, as we all know, we want to scan the patient in different positions. So you can either ask your patient to straighten their head, or maybe turn it slightly to the side, or turn it even more. If you have already asked the patient to turn the head slightly, maybe ask them to turn it back. So the idea is that this head movement will move the sternocleidomastoid muscle one way or the other. And so it will move it away from the area that you're trying to image, right? It may or may not get rid of it in the sense that you may still identify it. However, the idea is to move that shadow, that edge of the muscle, that shadow from the edge of the muscle away from where you're looking at, right? And so by doing that, obviously you can fully assess the area that you're looking. And then you may have to do this movement many times as you're moving to different areas of the neck. So, if you were able to move the shadow more laterally by asking the patient to do this, and then now you're going to look more laterally, looking for any potential nodes, that shadow is going to be there now. So you can either ask the patient to turn even more, or go back straight to move that shadow elsewhere. So the idea is that you ask the patient to change the position of the head, and by doing that, you're moving that shadow from the refraction away from your target area, right? But this is going to be a dynamic thing, because you may have to ask the patient to turn the head a few more times. In my experience, usually, asking the patient to turn the head a little bit takes care of things. I don't have to keep asking the patient to go back and forth. So it's not that it's going to be annoying to the patient. The other thing, of course, to do is you can slide the transducer away from that area. But as you know, sometimes that's not possible, because the neck has basically it's a small window, right? So we can only do so much. Sometimes it's a combination of both, asking the patient to turn the head and us moving the transducer more medially or more laterally. And so here's an example of how you can get rid of it, in that we have moved the shadow from the thyroid lobe, and now you can see that the edge of the muscle is on the trachea, right? And so obviously that's not going to affect us, right? So give it a try. See what you think. Like I said, it's nowadays, with the advance of compound imaging on most machines, this is not a huge problem, but I have still noticed it, even though compound imaging is on. So something to be aware of for those novice sonographers out there. So you don't think that it's an abnormality, it's just another artifact. Hopefully this is useful, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time. Bye-bye.